Welcome to the She's Bold podcast. I'm Beth Whitman. Hey everybody, I hope those of you in the U.S. had a great 4th of July and a nice long holiday weekend. Boy, it seems like forever ago, and it was less than a week. I ended up going to see fireworks at a friend's condo, and she had a stunning view over Lake Union. That's where they shoot off the fireworks here in Seattle. And we were so close to them. We were so close to the point that my friends thought that maybe the debris might fall on their deck. But it didn't appear to. But really, I loved being that close. I love the loud booms that just make your heart thump. And, you know, it reminded me of the Blue Angels when they come to Seattle. They, in their practice runs at least, they fly over our house. And I can go out on the deck and they are so close that I can actually read the numbers on the belly of the planes. And, you know, the rumble that comes with it, I just think it's fantastic. So it just, I don't know, it just makes me feel so alive. Gosh, I just love it. Anyway, that was the 4th of July weekend. I spent it doing that, going to see the fireworks, and also just recovering from my marathon that I ran the weekend before. And what I'm going to do today, I'm actually going to talk about that marathon and what I went through, mainly mentally, really, because that was actually a bit more interesting and maybe a little bit more challenging to me than the physical part of it. And I don't mean to say that physically it wasn't difficult, but, you know, gosh, anytime you do something that's difficult, really. I mean, for somebody else, it might be a half marathon or it might be a long bike ride or something. There's so much of it is just mental and getting through it mentally. So I want to talk a little bit about that. So I'll get to that in a moment. Before I do that, I want to invite you to become part of our Patreon community. Look, here's the deal. You can support the She's Bold podcast for as little as $2 a month. That's like 50 cents an episode. That is such a good deal. And hopefully you think the episodes are worth it. Most of them are conversations that I have with other women, very bold women. Today's going to be a little bit different, but hopefully you find some inspiration in these. And what I've done is I've added some benefits for supporters. So $2 a month, that's just like saying, yes, it's like a tip jar. Yes, you're doing a great job. I want you to keep going. If you bump up to $5 a month, you'll have access to bonus content and be invited into our She's Bold Facebook group. At $10 a month, you'll get to submit questions to future guests and receive a copy of one of my Wanderlust and Lipstick books that I wrote. And at $20 a month, you'll get all of those benefits. And in addition to that, you'll get a Be Bold bracelet. So it's a pretty cool deal, some nice swag, but it's really a way for you to show your support of the show. And let me know that you're out there for one thing, but let me know you want more of what you've been listening to. For details, just go to shesboldpodcast.com/Patreon, and all the details are right there. So, okay, as you folks may know, I recently ran a marathon. It was on June 30th, and it was the Cascade Super Series Marathon that goes from the top of Snoqualmie Pass down to North Bend, and it's here in Washington State. It's not too far from Seattle. And when I say it goes down to North Bend from Snoqualmie Pass, I do mean down because it's a gentle downhill course. It's actually one of the fastest in the country. Now, I ran a marathon last July that took place mostly on this same course. So the Cascade Super Series Marathon is just a little bit different, making it just a tad faster. But I knew the course already. When I ran it last year, however, it was about 20 degrees warmer. It was a full month later in the season, and it was pretty hot. And that can make, you know, for a slower race. I think for most people, they're going to be slower in the heat. So I wanted to do this same course, but I wanted to do it earlier in the summer. My hope was to have my fastest race yet and also qualify for the Boston Marathon. And I won't go into all the details about how to qualify for Boston. I went over that in episode 58, but I will say that I have qualified twice already, but they changed the qualifying times last year, and now you have to be 5 minutes faster than previously in your age group. And at least for my age group, it's 5 minutes faster. Last year, to qualify, it would have been a 4-hour marathon or less. And this year to qualify, I had to come in under 3 hours and 55 minutes. So to put that into perspective, my fastest race so far is 3 hours, 57 minutes, and 41 seconds. So shaving off a few minutes to get me under that 3:55 mark doesn't sound like a big deal, but actually it is. It means you've got to be faster on every mile and just not let up. It's weird. It doesn't sound like it should be that hard, but it is. So I have to be faster, but the training I've been doing for the past couple of months has been geared toward endurance races, not speed. In other words, I am running long distances. And I've been running a lot of long, slow miles rather than shorter, faster miles. And I was a little concerned about how this training plan would affect my marathon, but I wanted to be open to the fact that I could still do well in this race. So to give you a bit more insight, up until a couple of months ago, actually probably 2.5 months ago now, I had been running about 30 to 35 miles a week, 5 days a week, including a couple of days of speed work. But then I ramped up to running about 60 miles over 6 days and keeping the pace relatively slow. And for me, that's zone 2 training, meaning a low heart rate. That zone 2 is low heart rate. And that was all in an effort to build up my endurance, my long distances. And the idea is that this would get me prepared for the Epic 5 runs this fall. And as a reminder, that's 5 ultras. It's actually 50K in 5 days on 5 Hawaiian islands. And then it would also help me prepare for the 4 deserts next year. Now, the 4 deserts, as you have probably heard here before, it's 250 kilometers, 155 miles each over 7 days across 4 different deserts. So it's 250 kilometers over 7 days across the Namib in Namibia. It's 250 kilometers over 7 days across the Atacama in Chile, 250 kilometers across the Gobi in Mongolia, and then 250 kilometers in Antarctica. I know it's a lot. It's like lift your jaw off the ground after hearing that. So I felt strong after doing so much training, these long runs. I felt strong going into the marathon, but I wasn't sure if all those long miles were going to translate into the speed that I needed. So the race itself, I felt ready and relatively rested for the marathon. So I went into it with a really good headspace. Even so, for the first 5 miles, I was playing some mental games about how I was never going to finish all 26.2 miles, so I should just drop out early, and what would that look like? And I really had to muster all of my mental energy to get beyond that. I kept thinking that I could DNF, which is did not finish, and I was like, well, nobody would fault me if I had a DNF. You don't have to finish this race. And those first 5 miles are really beautiful. They're on a gravel path, as is much of the race, and it follows along a beautiful lake. And if I hadn't been trying to hit a goal pace, I would have just stopped to take photos. It was that pretty. Anyway, I really had to talk myself into hanging in there. And in retrospect, the pace was probably a little fast for me, and that's why I was feeling that way. Because when I go out for a run, I feel like I could go all day. And I think that's just because I'm set at a lower pace. But what I did in those miles, I reminded myself that the same thing happened last time I did a marathon. During those early miles, I was questioning whether I could even complete it. And I finished that marathon. That was last year. So I figured I could get past the negative talk and complete this one as well. So I just went back to that fact that, yeah, you know what, last year you thought the same thing early on, that you weren't going to be able to finish the marathon. And you did. So I knew that I could do it this time too. So, and then really by mile 6, I was in a groove, and then I just kept pushing, and I felt I got past that mental issue and then just kept going. So now in marathons, they have what's called pacers, and these are experienced runners who run at a certain pace. And for example, someone might be running to keep a 4 hour and 30-minute pace or a 4 hour pace. And what these pacers do is they hold a placard so you can see them. They hold it up. And if you want to keep at that certain pace, you just hang in there with them. You're just running right behind them. So I wanted to run a 3:55 marathon, but there wasn't a pacer for my time, unfortunately. There was one for 350 and there was one for a 4-hour pace. And at the start, I positioned myself between the two. So the 350 and the 4. And see, I needed 355. And I kept just ahead of the 4-hour pacing group. And that 4-hour group was running a bit fast. I'm assuming the pacer wanted to start out faster, knowing that people would slow down on the latter half of the race. So I was probably keeping just my perfect pace, what I needed to be keeping for that 355 marathon. But after mile 5, I started to slow. I let that 4-hour group of people pass me, the 4-hour pacer. And my thinking was they were going faster than I wanted anyway. And as long as I could kept them in my sights, I could see them ahead, I'd be able to catch up on the downhill portion later in the race. So mile 6 and 7 and a little bit beyond actually goes through a tunnel. And all bets are off there because GPS doesn't work. So it is more difficult to track your timing in terms of that. So I tried to do that, tried to keep up my pace at that point, but it's completely dark. And you're not really stumbling, but it's you have to really focus on your footing in there because it is completely dark, and you have a flashlight, so you're lighting your own way with the flashlight. But what I did after getting through the tunnel. And throughout the rest of the race, I checked in with myself pretty regularly, but I knew that I was losing time with each mile. And I felt that if I pushed the pace I needed for my goal time, I didn't think I could maintain it. I didn't think I would last for the 26.2 miles. So what I did was I backed off just a bit. So I slowed down just a little bit, not much, but enough that with every mile, I lost some time. And then at one point, it just became clear that I wasn't going to make my time at all. Now, I did manage to keep moving at a good, not great, but a good pace. And I just kept looking forward to each mile marker. So in order to keep myself motivated, I just kept thinking, just get to the next mile, just get to the next mile. And I did notice that I was really having to force myself to keep up with my nutrition also. And I take GU gels, and I sip on water. And I have a very regular schedule of eating when I run. And it's usually, I have my first GU gel at mile 4 or 5, and then every 3 miles afterward, I'm really strict about it. So I'm getting nutrition, I'm getting some calories in very regularly. And if I sway from this, I really start to lose power. So I knew it was important to keep up on that. So even though I didn't feel like taking out my GU gel and squeezing it into my mouth, I forced myself to, and that made a big difference in keeping me going. Now, I knew that coming up to mile 18 that John would be there, as it was one of the few spots on the trail where spectators had access. So there would be lots of people there. So I kept focused on that as a milestone. And then once I passed that marker, mile 18, I saw John. He was there taking some photos. And I saw everybody else there who was, sitting on the sidelines, kind of supporting their loved ones. I really had a strange thing happen. So I got past that. And okay, so at that point I have like another 8.2 miles, it was probably less than 8 miles to go at that point. I felt, this is the weird thing that happened to me. I felt an energy pushing me, like on my back, literally pushing my back. And I felt that it was my mom. Now, my mom passed away a long time ago, and she never knew me as a runner. But I felt her energy. I felt her encouragement. And seriously, it felt like there was a hand on my back just pushing me. And that sensation didn't last. It was less than a mile, I know, but it did keep me going. Then I realized that the 4-hour pacers were well ahead of me, and that I wasn't going to be able to catch up with them, and that I was not going to make my time. And that was around mile 20. But I realized early on, I realized from the beginning that it was okay if I didn't make my time. But I felt like having my mom's help and being in some runner's high state right around that mile 20, I started to realize how grateful I was just to be there running that day. I was grateful to John for being so supportive and being my crew and being my biggest fan. And I was grateful for Sabrina. She's the race director. She's been on the podcast here too. And I was just so grateful for her putting on the race. And I was grateful for my friends whose party I left early the night before so I could get enough rest before the race. And I just kind of went through this list of people that I was grateful to. And it was just, it was pretty interesting. It just made me feel really good to be out there. And at that point, I just let go and I started to have fun. I started talking to people I was passing because before that I was so focused. I was just thinking, don't talk to me. I'm on a special time here I'm trying to make, as are many of the people. But at this point, I just started talking to people that I was passing. And at that point, people were slowing down. You know, you hear that people bonk around 18 to 20 miles in, and that was definitely happening to people. So they were slowing down, they were limping, they were just not looking strong. And truthfully, I felt good. So I was just encouraging them and making sure they were okay. Now, about a quarter mile from the finish, there were a couple of guys who were walking, and I made them run it in. I wouldn't let them pass me, but I did shame them into not letting a girl beat them. So they at least ran that last quarter mile. They were nice guys. They said that they kind of gave up. They weren't too concerned about it because they realized they weren't going to qualify for Boston with their time. So they were just kind of walking it in. But I made them run that last bit. So when I crossed the finish line, I crossed at 4 hours, 4 minutes, and 39 seconds. I felt strong. And John said he's never seen me cross the finish line where I didn't want to just collapse on the ground afterward. Like I came across and I just felt great. I just kept walking. I went to look for food, went to say hi to some people that I knew, people who had come in before me or they were coming in shortly after me. I just felt good. Actually, I felt so good that I was concerned that I had, as they say, I left something on the course, meaning I didn't give it my all. And John insisted that it was because that I felt good was because I was in so much better shape than in the past. And it's true that I've run slower times and haven't felt as good as I did then. And then I realized, at every mile, I was checking in with myself and just making sure that I was doing my best at every mile. Still lingering in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I should have pushed harder. Maybe there was at some point I should have pushed harder. But what I did is I checked in with an ultra endurance coach that I've been working with, and I spelled all this out in an email, kind of wondering out loud, maybe if I didn't push hard enough. And he said that if I had made my time, that I wouldn't have been training properly for the endurance races. And the fact that I came across the finish line strong, meant that I'm physically more prepared for these ultra events that I have coming up and that I shouldn't have run a faster race. So I felt better about that. So all the ultra endurance running that I've been doing specifically for these bigger, longer events, that has paid off. And I think that is super clear. And, overall, I was not disappointed that I didn't reach my goal, that 3:55 pace, because I just felt so great coming across the finish line. And I was concerned leading into the marathon that I might not have the speed to make my goal pace because I was doing so much distance running, but I also went into it with a positive attitude, believing it was possible, but also knowing that I wouldn't be disappointed otherwise. So I think it all worked out. Knowing how strong I came across the finish line, I have a better idea about how my future training will build upon the base that I now have and how it will get me across 5 finish lines in Hawaii on the Epic 5 run and also across, what will be 1,000 kilometers in 4 deserts next year. I think the big picture here is that I just really like to experiment and see what I'm capable of. And I think at a time, meaning after 50, I'm 53, when a lot of people believe they are on the downside of life, that they're not going to be as physically fit, I feel like I've barely begun. And I actually don't think I've run my fastest marathon yet. I think it's in the future. I think definitely I can run a faster marathon. Now, I know what my next 18 months looks like in terms of races, but I don't know what I'll be involved in after that, like in 2021. But no doubt I'll be doing something challenging, whatever that means to me at the time. Now, the Epic 5 runs that I've talked about, they got moved from September to November. And hopefully, maybe you can join me. That'll give you enough time to train at this point. But that left me without something to train for immediately. So I just signed up for my first 50 miler. It's the Cascade Super Ultra 50 miler, and that's on September 28th. And that's actually the same course as the marathon I just ran. It's further out, obviously, another 24 miles out. But it runs, the latter half of that runs the same marathon course. So the 50 miler in September, Epic 5 in November. And I just challenge you, come join me. We're going to have a lot of fun. Come join me on one of those. It'd be so much fun. So that is my race report. I posted some photos of me running the marathon on my Facebook page, along with a brief description of my run, my experience there. And so just make sure we're friends on Facebook if you want to see those. I'll be posting some on Instagram as well. Thank you so much for listening today. I don't know if that was helpful to you, but if you are planning on a marathon yourself, even a half marathon, even whatever kind of event you're doing, I'd love to hear from you. I want to know what you are up to, whether it's your first or your 50th marathon or your Ragnar or some other event that you're challenging yourself to. Just shoot me a little note, Beth at shesboldpodcast.com, because I want to hear about it. Anyway, for links to those events, you can go to shesboldpodcast.com/episodes, and that's where you'll find the show notes for this and all of my other conversations. You can also find those links and show notes in whatever podcast app it is you're using to listen to this. And don't forget, if you'd like to support the show and let me know how much you enjoy the She's Bold podcast and how much inspiration you find here, and that you look forward to hearing all of the positive information in a time when we are just surrounded by so much negativity, go to shesboldpodcast.com/Patreon. You can connect with me by friending me on Facebook, and I'm WanderGal on Instagram. Ladies, you can join the Be Bold Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/BeBoldGroup. And there you're going to find support and encouragement for whatever ways you're trying to be bold. We've got Be Bold meetups where we get together in person. Those are starting to form as well, so you can join some ladies in your community if you'd like to. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the She's Bold podcast. And of course, until next time, be bold.